Hello, and welcome to the Second Breakfast Club. And thank you for joining me for my review of Episode 3, The Rings of Power, Adar. And I'd just like to start by saying that I really enjoyed this episode, much more than the first two, but I was a bit disappointed we didn't get more dwarves. Unfortunately, we don't get them here, but hopefully in Episode 4 we do. Now, to keep my thoughts a bit more cohesive on the episode, I'm going to talk about each of the storylines in full before moving on to the next. I just think it'd be a better way to get all my thoughts out on each part as opposed to kind of going scene by scene the way they show it in the show. So starting with Arondir. These scenes were fantastic, with some complaints here and there, but we'll get to those. The show opens up with Arondir being dragged through a large tunnel, which turns out to be this passageway built by the orcs and presumably their slaves. And they have these cool, the whole passageway is covered with these tarps meant for blocking out the sun so the orcs can travel by day through the Southlands and not have to worry about the sun, as well as a good way to travel unnoticed. And in a later scene, that's when you see the huge, how big it is, this tunnel, this passageway that they've built. Makes me kind of wonder, well, where did this start? Where did they come from? I'd like to see more of that. Maybe we will. And so in these scenes, we actually get introduced to 3 actually named orcs. If you look in the credits for the show, you can actually see that 3 of these orcs that we meet are given names. And we have the first one, Lurka, who seems to be kind of like the supervisor of the work crew. And then we have Wrath, who he seems to be like the motivator for the slaves via his whip and a quote he says in the show there. And then we have Magrot. Magrot seems to be kind of like the overseer of the whole operation. He seems to be the one in charge, and he's the only orc, and the first orc that we've met, that actually has metal armor. He's wearing a metal helmet, as opposed to the rest of the orcs that we've seen so far, who look a bit more primitive. They're wearing bone armor and skulls and hides to protect themselves, where this guy's wearing armor. And so Arondir's then thrown into the working area where they're continuing to dig the tunnel further, and he's greeted by his elf friend Medor. I don't really remember how he says his name, if he ever actually says his name. And we also meet the Watch Warden Revion, if that's the right pronunciation, I'm not sure. And they kind of talk for a little bit. Medor seems to be under the assumption that they're not just digging tunnels, but they're actually, the orcs are looking for something. Not sure if it's a weapon or what it is they're actually trying to find, but supposedly they're trying to find something. And here in this scene, they also reveal that the orcs seem to worship a figure that they call Adar. And Rivion, the Watch Warden, believes that Adar is actually Sauron. So this is the first connection that we get for Adar being Sauron being Adar, and the return of Sauron. And then this scene was great. I really enjoyed it. You see the elves, they're kind of resistant towards taking down the tree. The orcs are telling them to take it down. And then Magrot shows up and rewards them with water. But it was really just a fake out. He slits Medor's throat while he's drinking the water. I'm a little confused and thought it was rather weird. There was barely any blood. It looked more like a small surface cut on the neck, not really a death-dealing blow to the carotid artery. But maybe they didn't want to do a lot of blood for that, to try to keep it a bit more family-friendly. I don't know. Just seems weird. I mean, some of the following scenes we get are pretty gruesome. So I don't get why he didn't bleed all that much. And then after Magrot slits Medor's throat, we get Rivion very angry and begins cursing out Magrot in Elvish, as you see here. And the best translation I could find for that was cursed wild beast. It seems to be what he's saying, and he repeats it a couple times. And here we get one of the most exciting scenes in the show so far, in my opinion, where the elves attempt to escape with the intention of what Rivian stated before, that only one of them needs to get away so that they can go and get help and come back with an army. And so Rivian manages to use the chains and actually hit Magrot and take him down, and then they start kind of pooling together, and they're using their tools to try to chop their chains. They got them all linked together, and they're just smacking away. And from best I could tell, the first person to get freed was supposed to run away as fast as they could to go get help. This elf, who starts to try to get away, he ends up getting an axe thrown into his back, doesn't make it, so they have to continue to try to fight. We get the leaping scene of Arondir coming down with his axe and hitting the top of the tarps that are set up over the tunnel, knocking it down, and it forces the orcs into the sunlight, which they don't like, so it buys them more time. And this is where I kind of start to wonder if the majority of elves are just kind of incompetent when it comes to fighting. Only the main hero elves that we've seen, aka Arondir and Galadriel, seem to be capable of doing anything. But we get this warg. Looked terrible in my opinion. I first saw it and I couldn't stop thinking of Ed, the hyena from The Lion King. It just looked like that. It looked bad.
It's not funny, Ed. Hey, shut up!
And we get this scene where the hyena starts basically killing all the elves. None of them can stand a chance against this hyena, this warg. They all fail pathetically, except for Arondir. And Arondir manages to get the warg with the chain stuck underneath the roots of the tree. There was one moment during this part where I think we maybe missed a scene. Maybe they cut something that had Rivian in it. Because if you notice here, he's not there, and then he shows up in this next cut. There, kind of looks wounded up against the wall there. I thought that was a little funny, just something I noticed and wanted to point out. But anyways, Arondir gets the warg trapped under the roots of the tree and yells to Rivian, "Free yourself," is what it's what it said in the subtitles. However, I listened to what he was trying to say a couple times, and I couldn't determine what he was saying, and I couldn't find a translation for yourself. But I did find one for free, and it doesn't seem to match what he's saying. And then, so Rivian goes to escape. He starts climbing the wall, and then we get the part of the scene that we've seen before in the trailers where Arondir flies through the air again, and he grabbed a stick, a little twig off of the roots, and used that and stabbed Magrot in the neck. So this guy just doesn't, gravity does not apply to him. Rivian makes a break for it, the warg goes after him, and Arondir is able to throw the spear that the female elf died trying to wield before, and he skewers the warg. And then Arondir tries to climb up the wall to see Rivian escape, only to see that he has been shot by an arrow. And if you notice in the background, there's 3 orcs back there, one of them with a bow. And then Rivian gets shot again, but this arrow comes from more behind Arondir, so don't really get to see where it comes from. So he sees Rivian get shot twice and shouts out to him in Elvish, which from the translation I found means brother. He gets pulled down off the wall, and because Magrot's dead, it seems like Lurka's in charge now, and decides that they're going to bring Arondir to Adar. Which, this is actually at the end of the episode, and it leaves you on a cliffhanger with a blurry face of Adar, who we ultimately know what he looks like. as seen here in Game of Thrones, Uncle Benny. Moving on from there, we get the Harfoot storyline. And it opens with this really strange parade that the Harfoots are all dressed up in what looks like orcs and wolf costumes. At least it looked that way to me. And they're marching around chanting, "Nobody goes off trail, nobody walks alone."
Nobody goes off trail. And nobody walks alone. That's right. Nobody goes off trail. And nobody walks
alone. Unless that is you fall behind, and then tough luck will mourn you later. Like, the one thing we learned about Harfoots in this episode is they are cowards, and there is just no honor among them. We get confirmation, as I predicted, that Nori would want to use Sadoc's book to find the stranger's constellations. And then we get this exchange between Poppy and Nori. Nori saying that there's head sense and then there's heart sense. And Poppy comes back at her with, no, there's common sense and then there's nonsense. And I feel like the showrunners and writers could use a lesson in sense from Poppy here, because they write a lot of nonsense.
There's common sense and nonsense, and if you're all out of the first, then you can borrow some of mine.
We move on from there. Sadoc here can write his own speeches, but the great and wise Gil-galad can't. That seems kind of silly. And like I said before, we find out just how cowardly and cruel the Harfoots are with Sadoc's eulogy of the left behinds. They even laugh at one of their fallen Harfoots who was killed by bees.
Lovo Bulger book. Bees.
And we also get this actually sad moment where we learn Poppy lost her whole family in the last migration. She is alone. That was actually like a sad, touching moment. I actually found myself feeling for her. And then we get the stranger creeping into the party, comes across the pages that Nori set down and accidentally burns them, because apparently he doesn't know how fire works. And then he crashes the party. I think it's kind of weird how incompetent they're making him seem. Like, if he is supposed to be a Maya or a wizard, shouldn't he at least be somewhat intelligent? But anyways, so the stranger crashes the party, everyone sees him, and now the Harfoots are calling Nori a liar. But I don't really know what she lied about. I'm not sure if I missed something there. And then that one Harfoot who is just a complete wretch the entire time is quick to want to decaravan her whole family. Because again, these Harfoots are just heartless. And then her stepmother, Marigold, basically tells her stepdaughter that she's not special. What a wonderful family moment. And then what in the world is this quote supposed to mean?
That the tallest milkweed gets snipped. It's time to pack.
And then we get Poppy pulling her cart all alone. Again, making me actually feel bad for her. And yet, despite how bad she has it, having lost her entire family and having to pull her cart by herself, she still only cares about her friend Nori, who has fallen behind with her family because her father is hurt. And then the stranger shows up, calls Nori his friend, and saves the day by helping them push their cart. These scenes made me really hate the Harfoots in general for just how pathetic and cowardly and superstitious they are. But they actually made me like Nori and Poppy more. They did a good job in making them likable here in this episode, to the point where I kind of forgot how unnecessary their existence in the story actually is. And then we get to the Numenor scenes. I definitely enjoyed the scenes for Numenor, except for the parts with Galadriel. She's still unbearable. But we get here amazing shots. We get the armor, the clothing, and the ships really give off this very Greek Peloponnesian vibe. You can tell it's very inspired by those cultures. You get the cool shot as they're entering the city where you see the Numenor soldier up in the tower. And from a distance, he kind of looked, to me at least, like a Gondorian soldier in Minas Tirith. So I liked that. It kind of made me think of that. And the whole time in Numenor, it felt like I was watching a live-action Assassin's Creed Odyssey movie. It was fantastic. Really cool to see their take on Numenor and just how vast and large the city was. It was beautiful. So we move on to Galadriel and Halbrand being presented in front of the Queen, and apparently no one in Numenor kneels. Is that really a thing? And also, if it is, I wonder why. And here we get more of Galadriel being ungrateful and unbearable, constantly putting her foot in her own mouth, which really makes me wonder, what is the point of Galadriel being thousands of years old if she's learned nothing in that time and it has to be given advice on what to do from Halbrand and still fucks it up? And then from there we move on to Isildur, where we meet him on a Numenorian ship, and it seems he's in training to join the Sea Guard. And these scenes gave me like this real Pirates of the Caribbean vibe, while also making me think of the Navy SEALs Budge training. If you know what that is, you get that, like where they're bringing the ships up onto the shore, and it kind of gave me that vibe. Now we get this little part of the scene where they're training on the ship, where a character named Imrahil kind of goes flying off the ship, holding onto a rope. And it makes me wonder, so is he actually an ancestor to Prince Imrahil, or were they just not creative enough to come up with something different? Or did they intend it to be kind of like an Easter egg nod to the character? I'd be curious to know about that, if he is an ancestor, and if he actually has any relevance in the rest of the show. Probably not. Just something small I noticed. Then we move on. The Queen is speaking with Elendil. I like here how they get the translations for his name correct, both of them. And we kind of get a hint here that the Queen's motives aren't very clear. She seems a bit more mysterious than she lets on, which we explore a little bit more in a further scene.
You will inform Farazon that she's escaped.
I informed him last time.
That was a dog.
Did that soldier really confuse a dog for Farazon? What was the point of that line? And then we get one of my favorite scenes in the show, because it's where Elendil finally puts Galadriel in her place as the petulant child she is. He even goes on to compare her to his children. I'll put the quote here because I'm not going to say it. But I thought it was perfect.
I have a daughter who runs fast and a son who runs blind. Your eyes bear a striking resemblance to both.
Then we get the horseback scene, which was great up until this cringy close-up moment. First time we're really seeing Galadriel smile here, and she looks like she's having way too much on the back of that horse. Now, did Halbrand really think he could steal this guy's crest, and the blacksmith would be none the wiser? Like he would forget that he just didn't have a crest a moment before? Also, where did he get the money to buy everyone a round of drinks? The dude just came in to Numenor after being stranded on a scrap of wood in the middle of the ocean.
How about this? Next few rounds on me.
These guys continue to insult him, calling him low man. Strange insult, but whatever. And then we get this awesome fight scene where Halbrand completely kicks all their asses. But it was very cool, but strange at the same time. He almost seemed like he was possessed, like he couldn't control himself, and he didn't want those guys to antagonize him because he knew what would have happened. It was very evil-like, which kind of ties into, I think, what Rivian was saying, how the blood of those who stood with Morgoth still darkens their veins. So is there something in his veins, quite literally, that kind of makes him a bit evil? I don't know. Or easily susceptible to evil? The Hall of Lore was cool. I wish I could hang out there and read all those scrolls. The mural of Elros and Elrond was a nice touch. Really cool looking, and I kind of wonder if any of the other people depicted in the background are actual characters or just random people. And here we learn that Nerd of the Rings was right. The symbol that Sauron uses is actually a map of the Southlands, aka Mordor. But one thing that doesn't make any sense to me is why would a human spy who was captured in the dungeons of the enemy would draw an identical image, and why he would be writing in black speech. I didn't really get that part. That didn't make much sense to me, but maybe I'm thinking too much about it there. Next, we get a puppet play depicting Galadriel saving the queen from an evil-looking soldier. It actually looked like something out of Warhammer to me, and also made me kind of question, do the people of Numenor love Galadriel or hate her? Because why would they have a play depicting her as a hero saving the queen if the Numenorians hate elves and don't want her there? And it's here we learn also that Elendil gets a promotion from Sea Guardsman Captain to Post Captain. I would love to learn more about the chain of command in Numenor. Coming from a military background myself, I find it interesting. And overall, the scene with Elendil and his children, Isildur and I can't remember what her name is, Anarion? I don't remember what the daughter's name is. Anarion, maybe? I might be wrong. I thought this scene was really good. It actually did a good job portraying these characters in a way that gave them more depth than what we've seen so far with the rest of the cast, mainly the elves. And then we meet up with Halbrand, and he's in jail. And we learn that he's supposed to be king of the Southlands, and that the crest on his necklace is actually the sigil of his house and his ancestors. And I find it annoying that they seem to be recycling Aragorn's story arc for Halbrand, as if they couldn't come up with their own idea. But I think it's pretty clear to me that Halbrand is not Sauron. And instead, what we're going to get here is Halbrand's going to kind of follow the similar story of Aragorn, where he's going to return to the Southlands and attempt to unite the kingdom under one banner and be the king. But I think what's going to happen here is, like I said, it's pretty clear he's not Sauron. But I think what we're going to see here is he's going to be corrupted by the end of this and turn into the Witch King. That's my prediction for Halbrand. Not Sauron, but the Witch King. And we get one last sweeping shot over Numenor, and we see a structure that's kind of reminiscent of Minas Tirith with the long, I don't even know what you'd call this, but that part. We're following Muriel up this large tower where her father seems to have been banished to, and here we learn that Muriel seems to have mixed motivations, which basically means she's going to seem bad, but she's pretending and is actually good because they have to set her up for her girl power moments with Galadriel later on. To me, this episode was a great improvement for the show. And I think personally, I've finally come to terms with some of the changes they've made to the aesthetics for like the way characters look and, you know, the hair and changes in the condensed storyline. Those issues aren't as much of an issue to me anymore. But at this point, the only thing I really still hate is just Galadriel. She's just unbearable to me, and I feel they've really destroyed her character to a point where she can't be saved. She makes no sense to me. She's one of the oldest beings in Middle-earth that we've actually met, save maybe Celebrimbor, and she's dumber than all the mortal characters. How is it that Elendil is more of an adult and wiser than someone who's thousands of years older than him? Elendil is fantastic, by the way. This show is greatly improving for me, despite my disdain for Galadriel. I actually found myself at the end of the episode disappointed that it was over, and super excited to see where it goes next. I would rate this episode... Rating this episode was a bit harder for me. I'm going to go with a 7. I know it seems like I'm just kind of going up 1 point each episode, but I feel like this episode was so much better than what we've already seen, and I already liked episode 2 a lot, just for the dwarves. This episode had action that I was hoping for, and introduced new characters that I actually want to see more of, and I really want to see more of Numenor. This episode also made me really want to play Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War again. Like, I loved those games, and it's really cool to see the transitioning phase of the Southlands into the Mordor we know. I hope you enjoyed my review / breakdown of episode 3, Arda, the Rings of Power. Hit that like button, and subscribe to see more of my breakdowns for the Rings of Power, and check out my gameplay for other Lord of the Rings titles you may know and like yourself. You can join me in my Discord server, linked down below, to continue the conversation about the show, and other Lord of the Rings stuff in general. And until next time, farewell.